I do love the three caricatures of the different types of Americans. They're all dual-wielding pistols.
They are,
so.
yes.
Mummies.
Man, 1999 was quite a year at the movies. Not only was it the time when people still went to the movies with a regularity that theater owners would kill for today, but the array of classics to emerge from that particular year remains quite impressive today. The Matrix, The Sixth Sense, Fight Club, Magnolia, The Blair Witch Project, and Election are among 1999's best. It was even the year that Star Wars came back. But perhaps the most beloved film of all from 1999 is writer-director Stephen Sommers' The Mummy, a picture that remains a consistent fan favorite today. I'm Scott Collura, and this is my flashback review of 1999's The Mummy. What is it about the Brendan Fraser, Rachael Weisz action comedy romp that's so appealing? And why hasn't it lost any of that appeal despite being the type of movie that Hollywood kind of doesn't make anymore? Well, perhaps the answer lies within the question itself. Hollywood really doesn't make movies like The Mummy anymore, and a lot of us sure do miss them. But let's back up a bit. Believe it or not, The Mummy is kind of a remake of the 1932 Universal Monsters classic of the same name, insofar as the basic plot. In ancient Egypt, the Prince Imhotep's lover dies, and so he attempts to use magic to resurrect her. But he's captured before he can, and punished for his crimes, mummified and buried alive. Thousands of years later, in the quote-unquote modern era of the early 20th century, he's accidentally revived, a now supernatural being intent on bringing his dead lover back to life, even if it means sacrificing a young woman to do so. What's so clever about Sommers' movie is that he took that horror premise and turned it into a swashbuckling adventure comedy. It's also way more entertaining than its 8 minutes of opening voiceover and exposition would lead one to expect. Typically, when you need to start your movie off with that much explanation and setup, it can be a real drag. And yet Sommers injects Imhotep's origin story with, admittedly late 1990s CGI scope, thrills, and sexiness that's all kind of silly and breakneck and fun. And yes, fun is a word that constantly applies to this movie. So by the time Arnold Vosloo's Imhotep has been buried alive, it's a Schrodinger's mummy situation. Alive or alive dead, he's stuck where he is. A supernatural loaded gun waiting over 3 millennia for Fraser's adventurer Rick O'Connell and Weisz's librarian Evelyn Carnahan to stumble onto him, like the boulder from Raiders of the Lost Ark rolling through the set of a screwball comedy.
Look what I got.
Fraser is of course terrific as O'Connell. He's kinda cocky but with a who me vibe, and he brings big energy to things, whether he's yelling back at scary mummies or trying to talk his way out of the hangman's noose. But Weisz may actually be the MVP here, that her introduction as Evelyn involves her precariously trying to balance on a tall ladder in a Buster Keaton-esque display both sets the tone of the hijinks that are to come, while also identifying her as a smart but less than perfect cookie who is going to be as important in this story as O'Connell is, if not more important. Whether she's eagerly stepping over her brother who's just been punched in the face to learn more about the mystical city of the dead, or coaching said brother, a hilarious John Hannah, in deciphering ancient texts while fighting Imhotep's revived mummy lover, Evelyn has got it going on.
I am a librarian.
Sure, some of the early CGI effects of the mummy haven't aged all that well, but you know what? So what? They're still sort of cool, like when the slowly regenerating Imhotep is walking around with a half-open skull, or when his face subtly appears in the sandstorm. And I'm not even talking about the more famous face in the sand shots, but rather a brief moment that precedes those. And in fact, some of these effects still work like gangbusters. You try watching a scarab bury itself under a dude's flesh and try not to be freaked out a bit. That said, Sommers also leans into a lot of old school practical approaches as well, which no doubt add to the film's charm. Imhotep's mummy followers are often guys in suits, for example, and the director also shoots some of the film's more gruesome action in shadows or silhouette, maintaining that precious PG-13 rating. Even the film's weaker aspects wind up working in its favor in a way. We already talked about that opening exposition, but the band of competing American treasure seekers, a group of stereotypes as unmemorable as they come, wind up being red shirts anyway, meeting untimely demises that stand out way more than the characters themselves. Shout out to the guy who loses his eyes and his tongue, and is still played for laughs after that. It's almost as if Summers dug up some ancient scrolls that, once translated, gave him the key to making a movie that was going to work no matter what. And it does. And so The Mummy is getting an 8. Stephen Summers hit gold in 1999 with a fun, there's that word again, throwback to adventure films and screwball comedies that has managed to become a modern classic through the pure charisma and likability of the cast, and the filmmaker's mix of both old school and modern approaches to action, horror, and visual effects. It's no surprise that they're bringing the old gang back for a 4th Mummy movie soon, and maybe that at least will be the arcane magic that gets some butts back in movie theater seats too.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching our flashback review of 1999's The Mummy, starring Brendan Fraser, Rachael Weisz. I'm Clint Gage. Joining me, my partner in all things entertainment reviews here at IGN, and he's my little cartouche. It's Scott Collura. Scott, how's it going, man?
It's going well. I haven't seen this movie in so long, and it's so fun. I still really like this movie. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for finally giving it an official score. So prior to this, there was a review of the DVD release. IGN staff is who it's credited for, which is another reason why we need to do it again. They liked the movie well enough, but I think it docked it some points for the audio transfer, and the picture quality wasn't as good on the disc, but boy, does that not count as a proper review.
Well, this is the thing we run into, right, on IGN, which is that the web, because this is 1999, so IGN existed but was in its infancy, right? Yeah, so the a lot of our reviews of the older stuff just are it's a DVD review, or I like the Betamax reviews the most on our site, but
we can find those Laserdisc reviews. That's always a gem. But The Mummy, let's get into it. This is one of those movies that it's always funny to me because it holds a really special place for a lot of people, and it is a lot of fun. As we said, it's a totally solid adventure film. But one of the things that I've always found interesting is that the people that love this movie, like capital L, love this movie.
Yeah,
it seems to get sort of an outsized amount of love, which is it's a good movie, but it's just kind of strange to me how this movie stands out as something that everybody's like, oh, get away from The Mummy. I love The Mummy. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's like I was never one of those people. Like I saw it when it came out. I liked it a lot. I always would joke with my wife, because for some reason my father-in-law really loved it a lot,
Sure.
But like, and now I'm probably how old he was then, so like, but
we don't need it.
But yeah, I was never one of these people who was like, oh my God, The Mummy is in my top 10 or whatever. It's I hadn't seen it in quite some time before we rewatched it for this. But I can kind of see why people have such affection for it, especially if they saw it at maybe a certain age, where it's so fun and the characters are so likable. And for the time, the advent of CGI and all, which maybe hasn't held up that well, but it was doing some really interesting things at the time in terms of the creature design with all of that. So it was very striking, I think. It's
even giving like Ray Harryhausen vibes with the marching skeletons in a couple of scenes.
Yeah.
There are gags from Star Wars and gags from Indy, and but also like this movie is 90s as hell. He's like John Woo dual-wielding pistols for most of this movie.
I bet a lot of people fell head over heels for Brendan Fraser and for Rachael Weisz as well, because those characters, I mean, they're in their prime, and they're the romance between them is fun, but they're just so likable also, and fun and funny.
She's a real charming kind of nerd.
Yes,
And that for the hero of the story, one of the heroes of the story, for it to ultimately be her fault that the mummy comes back, because she's like, oh, there's no harm in reading a book. Nothing ever bad happened from reading them. And then she reads from the book, and like the end of the world. Here comes the end of the world. in spite of the fact that a whole movie's full of people are being like, don't do it, and like running in fear and all of this stuff. And
yeah, and there's so many of them as well in terms of just characters, right? Like I think it was around an hour and 10, and this is an old reference, so I apologize in advance, but the actor who played Dr. Bombay on the Bewitched TV show shows up, and he winds up having a he's the guy who flies them into the desert, and he gets a death scene. And, and I was like, it's like, that's Dr. Bombay, what? How many more characters are we going to introduce at the 1 hour and 10 minute mark? So like
even all of that stuff too is so sort of according to Hoyle movie, right?
Yeah.
Like it is a textbook adventure film, because the way that he's set up like stumbling through he's at a brothel. I guess it's just a bar. But he's just stumbling through and walking through a fountain saying, somebody spilled their drink. And like he's just this goofy old drunk that's a leftover from an old time. And then he ends up flying the plane, and he ends up dying, going out the way he wants to go out and all of that. And like, so even like the setup and payoff of all of the supporting cast it's all there, and it's all super textbook. Like, this is one of those movies that does everything that it's supposed to do, and it does it just a little bit better than average.
Yeah.
But like the sum total of all of those things being just a little bit better is like, this is a very, very good movie.
Yes, exactly. One thing that really stuck with me was because you're saying about like characters kind of getting their payoff. One thing I remembered very strongly from having seen it, last time I'd seen it, was the character of Benny and his ultimate fate in this movie. He gets stuck in the crypt. And
dying alone in the dark.
Dying alone as the scarabs are coming for him, and the torch goes out. And that had stuck with me. And it's like, he's comedic in his way, but he is snivelly, and he's a bad guy ultimately, right? I
do love the three caricatures of the different types of Americans also, because you see they're the same ones from Bram Stoker's Dracula, from Coppola's Dracula. There's like, one of them's the cowboy, one of them's the rich adventurer, and like, and so they all have sort of different flavors of.
Yeah,
but they're all dual wielding pistols, so
they are. Yes, yeah, and the trio of Americans who are sort of competing with them are kind of less memorable than some of the other characters in the film.
Those are the kind of guys that had that been a now famous actor's first role, like, we would remember it. If it had been a Skarsgård and that was his first role or something like that, we'd be like, oh yeah, no, that guy was great.
Right.
Even though he's got 17 minutes of screen time in a 2 hours and change movie, But,
right. Yeah. But not for some reason with these guys, not quite. Right. So
no, none of them really. I'm sure they all worked, but I don't know who they were.
Right.
I will say, I do think in highlighting the fact that this is a movie that has had legs maybe longer than it should have, or that are a surprising amount of relevance into this to now, but like, just looking at the other adventure movies that came out of the 90s was a great decade for adventure. Like, it's Jurassic Park through Independence Day and Men in Black, and I'll throw Apollo 13 in there, even though that was kind of a true, like, Bayhem was born in the 90s. Bad Boys and The Rock, and Matrix came out in 1999. The Phantom Menace, Star Wars, came back in the 90s. The Phantom Menace came out 2 weeks after The Mummy did.
Wow.
Wound up making 3 times as much money that year, but came out in the same that I think was May of 99.
But who could have predicted? Sorry to cut you off, but who could have predicted that the movie that everyone remembers and loves is the remake of Boris Karloff's The Mummy, right?
That's it. It's in some really good company, and it's obviously held its own for years. And so you come back to this question of just why.
Yeah. Well, think about how, not to make this a comparison with Phantom Menace, but like, think about how sort of serious the Phantom Menace takes itself in a way. And this is, again, a movie that is just willing to really like play. It's a Warner Brothers cartoon in some ways. Like you had said to me before we started recording, like, how strong is Brendan Fraser? Like, the feats,
cartoonishly so.
Right. Yes. Yeah. The feats that they undergo, and and it's just, people were there for it. It was what they wanted, and it worked. So
I do think the other question that's worth asking along these lines is do they still make movies like this? Is that part of its staying power? Is that, do we still have adventure movies like this that are sort of big and fantastic? Mad Max Fury Road kind of gets close, even though it's a sort of a more depressing version of this thing. But like with the way Jurassic World has petered out and Mission Impossible and
like Twisters, maybe I feel like
that kind of gets close.
Has that energy?
I really like the Dungeons and Dragons movie from a few years ago. That was good. I think Predator Badlands has some sort of mummy DNA in it in terms of the amount of fun that it has. But it might also be things like John Wick, you know?
More killing in John Wick, I get, or more more brutal.
Well, actually, I don't know.
There's
the body count in this movie is pretty, and the casual nature with which they kill just people on horses over there, is pretty remarkable. Even John. I love the moment where John Hannah, he's just trying to drink some scotch, and he just like takes a swig of scotch and he just shoots a guy running by and then takes another drink. Just like, who were you shooting at? And they wind up teaming up with the people that they were killing, and then at the end of this shootout, they just be like, all right, let's just stop. We'll come back tomorrow. It's like 30 people just died, man. You know, but it's one of those, again, like the tone and the vibe of this movie is one that can get away with that.
Yeah. Well, you have to wonder, like, because I was going to say so much of like fandom these days is very self-serious, where we have to worry about continuity between movies and and like our how badass is this hero or whatever, and that was very much not what this is at all, and I wonder if we've gone too far in that other direction. But then again, having said that, I realize the MCU can be pretty fun also, despite that.
It tries to be, yeah.
So I wonder if there's some seeds of the Mummy in the approach that Feige took to the MCU, The MCU is not a cartoon, even though it's based on the comic strip, but there's certain energy there as well, as opposed to maybe like the old DC movies, which were very self-serious. Like the audience wants to have fun to some degree, and then the Mummy is just giving you that.
It really is, and the amount of just the fact that Brendan Fraser is like, he's in prison at the beginning, and people just wailing on him with clubs, and he's just kind of like, stop it. One of the bellwethers for that for me is always like if they get thrown across a room and into a wall, and like how quick do they hop back up? And he's just the fight scene with the Mummy at the end. He's getting tossed all over the place into a wall, and then he's like looking up and giving a one-liner.
Right. I also love
the guy's superhuman as far as I can tell.
He is, yes. He is like a Wile E. Coyote or someone, right? So, but I also, and I had forgotten this part of the movie too, but I love how you don't just have Arnold Vosloo's Mummy, but then you have all the other mummies, like you mentioned, the Ray Harryhausen aspect of some of them, and they have some real. Speaking of Looney Tunes, they have some real fun. I mean, at one point, Brendan Fraser decapitates the mummy, and the mummy's bouncing its own head around, trying to catch its head, and then Fraser does sort of a double take, and I think he turns to Rachel Weisz, and
he might look directly at the camera.
he might, and he's like, Mummies.
Mummies. I think he hits it like a baseball bat. He swings the sword like a baseball bat, and the head like comes screaming straight at the lens, and it's like mummies. Yeah, I mean this movie knows exactly what it is, and we should also mention Stephen Sommers, the director of the movie. Like Stephen Sommers is one of those guys that made a good career out of making okay movies.
Right.
Like this was I don't think anybody would argue this is the best work that he did.
Yeah.
Like this was sort of his high watermark. The Mummy sequels were okay. They were still good, but didn't quite get back there. And then you start to look at like G.I. Joe: Rise of Cobra and things like that.
Yeah. And Van Helsing, I guess, right? Sort of.
Yeah. But he made a good career out of making very okay movies like this, and there was something about the time and the place and the subject matter, and and even the VFX in the late '90s it was a really tricky time for VFX in the late '90s because they weren't quite there yet, but movies and Hollywood in general were starting to lean on them more and more every year. I mean, The Matrix came out earlier this year, and obviously Phantom Menace was all shot digitally and mostly CGI backgrounds and everything. And so like the way that they were leaning into CGI before it was really there. Like most movies from that era, like Armageddon, I can't look at Armageddon. Looks terrible.
Yeah.
I loved that movie when it came out, partially because of Aerosmith, but mostly because I just loved that movie. It was another really great adventure film from the 90s, but I can't watch it anymore. Like because the VFX just don't hold up. And certainly not like they do from earlier in the decade with Jurassic Park, and I mean even Independence Day, which was 96, like that still used a ton of miniatures.
Right.
So like, but the thing about this movie is I don't mind it at all. Like the VFX, if you want to get myopic about how they look compared to do those skeleton mummy things hold up visually? No, they're cartoons. But so is the rest of the movie, and I really don't care.
Right, exactly.
It does not bump me.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. And it's almost like, to go back to Ray Harryhausen, it's like, if you watch a Sinbad movie or something, or Clash of the Titans, it's like those stop motion effects that were being used don't necessarily hold up either. Like we don't buy that that's really a statue coming to life or whatever. We know it's a puppet.
Yeah.
But we don't care because it's working in the context of that movie. And I feel like with this movie, a lot of films from this era, as you point out, the CGI just doesn't hold up now. But for this one, it's kind of like, oh, well, that mummy is clearly an actor who they've done some awkward CGIing of his face, but it's okay. It's still a cool idea. His body is reconstituting itself. And again, because the movie itself isn't meant to be taken super seriously, it works as well. So it's interesting. And then there's some parts of it that I think, like the scarabs, I'm sure are all CGI, but those actually still look pretty convincing too, so.
That's the thing. By 99, they were sort of getting there, but not quite there yet.
Right.
And I think this is from a strictly VFX perspective, this is a movie where the reach exceeds the grasp to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But again, like the tone and the vibes of this movie, like that's fine. If Bryn, whatever. That's not what I'm here for. Like I'm here for the fun. I'm not here for how it looks. Let's get out of here. I think that's going to do it for us. But Scott, thanks again for reviewing The Mummy. May your organs live forever in little jars with the cursed book. That's my hope for you. And thank you for watching. We will be back with another flashback review here before too long, so be sure to subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch. We'll see you next time.